This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, episode 34. This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, a show which answers one question from you, the listener, about CNC router tables, CNC software, hardware, web hosting, and business. I'll help you get started in your CNC hobby or business and help you cut through the confusion.
Today's episode is sponsored by themakersguide.com. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Griggs, and I'd like to thank you for listening into this show. I'm recording this on July 3rd. 2016, and you may hear some fireworks in the background. That's because this is the first year that fireworks have been legal in the state of New York. So if that happens, you'll just have to bear with it as people are expressing their joy at being able to use fireworks and celebrate in the manner that they see fit. Now, before we go any further into the show, for those of you who've never heard our show before, CNC Router Tips is a show that teaches you how to use your CNC router tables to build a hobby or business and how to effectively use them and where to get things and that sort of thing. But one of the things that is very time sensitive right now is the giveaway that we're having to celebrate the growth of our Facebook group. We have a private Facebook group, which at the time the contest was announced had just reached 3,000 members, and now we are nearly at 3,500. We're in the 3,425 range or so, and growing rapidly. But in order to celebrate that, we decided that we would give away a copy of Vectric V-Carve desktop software. And it is the DVD version, and it is fully licensable, and somebody will really enjoy that, and it will take their CNC experience to the next level as they're able to create many amazing projects and products with this software. So if you haven't entered the contest, time is running out because the deadline is July 4th at midnight Eastern Time. So if you'd like to enter that contest, go to cncroutertips.com/contest and enter. You'll have to be a U.S. citizen to win, and you've got to be over 18 years or older. There are more details and contest rules there on the site, and you can read them. And I wish each of you the best of chances and luck to win this. Somebody's going to be very happy to draw this, and the winner will be announced on the CNC Router Tips podcast. Today's question comes from Jay Dowling, and Jay has been a listener to the CNC Router Tips podcast for a while, and he sent in his question, and it's one that comes up quite frequently, and it's about CNC router bits and what you need, what they do, and how to use them, and where to go get them. So let's listen into Jay's question.
Can you go over what would be a good starter pack for someone in terms of bits, whether it's endmills, ball mills, tapered mills, 2 flutes, 4 flutes, carbide, coated carbide, all the kinds of features and 1/8 inch, 1/2 inch, whatever.
Thanks, Jay, for that question. It's a very good question, and one that I get a lot. I get asked this question quite frequently, in frankly every place that I post something, either my website or on the private Facebook group, and it's one of those things that every beginner struggles with because you have no idea what to use, what's good for which purpose, and when to use a particular type of bit. So let's just start with some of the more common bits. And one of the things that I want to point out is that we'll be discussing some of the more common bits that are out there, but there are a wide variety of bits that are available. And many times you will download a model that somebody has made, using one of the programs like Vectric Aspire or Meshcam or whatever, and they'll call out a specific bit, and it's usually a 1/4-inch bit. And the thing about that is, the reason that the 1/4-inch bit is such a popular bit size is because it's popular in handheld routing, and it's commonly available in the hardware stores. It's not necessarily the best bit for a particular job. So you have to look at things like how much material you are going to have to remove from your project, how small the details are in your project, and that sort of thing, and then decide on the bit size. So just remember that when you're looking at these different bits, that if a bigger bit is a better fit, then use a bigger bit. If a smaller bit is a better fit, then that's what you should be using. Okay? The first type of bit we're going to talk about is probably the most common used in CNC applications, and that is an up spiral bit. Up spiral refers to the way the flutes are machined into the bit itself. And there are several kinds of bits. Some are straight bits, which have no spiral at all. But these bits, the up spiral bits, are helix shaped. In other words, they twist up around the bit, sort of like a drill. But the difference is, with an up spiral bit, the flutes have been machined in such a way that it pulls the dust and the chips that are created while the bit is cutting, and it pulls them upward out of the hole that it's making and ejects them away from the bit. So that's what makes this an up spiral bit, because it's helically shaped spiral and because it ejects the chips up. That's all there is to it. Okay. That's the most common type of bit that's used for CNC applications. And they come in a variety of diameters. You can get them in 1/16 inch. You can get them in 1 millimeter. You can get them in 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, whatever size. But they would all share that same characteristic of having a spiral-shaped flute and ejecting the chips up. So that's the first style bit. And one of the characteristics of that is, as this bit cuts, it leaves kind of a rough top surface on your cut, but a smooth bottom surface. So it would be a good bit to use if you were going to need to leave a smooth surface in the bottom of your project, like in a sign, or as in the dados to join shelves together. Now, the exact opposite of the up spiral bit is the down spiral bit. And you probably guessed it. The down spiral bit has helical flutes which force the sawdust down into the kerf that it was cut out. And the sawdust can get pretty tightly packed with a down spiral bit. And in fact, a lot of times people will use a down spiral bit because they won't have to clamp something in place, because the sawdust that is created from the cutting process wedges the part into position and it doesn't move very much. So that's one benefit from the down spiral bit. Now, unlike the up spiral bit, the surface is very smooth when you're done with, the top surface is very smooth when you're done using a down spiral bit, and the bottom surface will be fuzzy. So it really is used a lot when people want a good surface that they don't have to sand a whole lot away on when they're done. One word of caution when using a down spiral bit. I use the down spiral bit quite frequently. It's a good bit, but you need to know this. Because the down spiral bit is packing the sawdust down into the kerf that it's creating, that material is there and can be rubbed by the bit and heated, because in the process of cutting, a chip is formed and ejected just on every bit that ever existed in the world. A chip is formed, and the heat is carried away by that chip. And so you're packing all these little chips down into a tight hole, and they're hot. And then if you add the rubbing of the down spiral bit, you can actually kindle a fire if you're not careful. So I don't recommend using a down spiral bit to drill holes, particularly deep holes, because all that sawdust is packed in the bottom and you're just heating it up and stirring it up, and it could be smoldering down there. So if you're going to drill holes, use a different bit than a down spiral bit. Now, we talked about the two spiral bits, but then there's the straight bit. A straight bit is a bit which has just two slots machined in it, which are parallel with the length of the tool. And, they can be either carbide or they can be made with tool steel. It really, high-speed steel. It really depends. And they were very common. This was the most common type of router bit that you would find in a hardware store. These are good for making dado cuts or any cut that doesn't require rapid changes in direction. I use a larger 1/2-inch diameter straight bit to remove a lot of material on some of my cuts, and it's kind of a go-to bit for me. It's kind of counterintuitive, but when I'm making a sign that has a lot of material to be removed, I'd rather remove it with a large bit and just get it out of the way and then go back in and do the detail work with a smaller bit. I'm going to put a link to a particular bit that I like for that reason. And all of these bits that I'm mentioning will be listed on a page at cncroutertips.com/bits. So you can go and look at these bits and see exactly what I'm talking about. Another style of bit that people use is a surfacing bit. And most of us have a spoil board, some call it a spoiler board, on their machine, which allows us to clamp material on there and go ahead and cut and not worry about ruining the aluminum that's beneath the table or the steel or whatever. So we chew up this spoil board instead of chewing up the machine. And, the spoil board's easy to replace. It's usually MDF. You unscrew it, put down a new piece, and off you go again. Well, before you start machining, you should surface the spoil board so that it is flat and true with the bit. Now, if you use a 1/4-inch bit to do this, it's going to take you a long time because the bit has to go down the length of the table, move over just a bit, come back the length of the table, move over just a bit, and repeat that process a 1/4-inch at a time, or whatever your step over is. And that can take a lot of time. So it makes sense to use a bigger bit, like I said before, to clear the spoil board. And a surfacing bit would do that. And the one that I use is fairly inexpensive. You can get all sorts of surfacing bits. Some will have indexable cutters, replaceable carbide cutting bits that you can use, and they're very expensive, very good, but very expensive. The one I use is by Magnate, and it's available on Amazon. In fact, every bit I'm going to talk about today is available on Amazon, and I'll give you links to each one of those. One of the reasons I'm doing that is so you don't have to go running all over the internet trying to find bits. Once you see the basic functionality and use of the bit, then you can go out and search for a particular brand and a particular type. But I wanted to make this as easy as possible for everybody who's listening, who wants to get started looking at bits. So anyway, this one is a Magnate surfacing bit, and the one I'm using has a 1/4-inch shaft, although they make it in a 1/2-inch shaft as well. And it is 1.5 inches in diameter. Now, they also make them up as far as 3 inches in diameter, but I don't have a router that is really capable of spinning that large a bit comfortably. But what this bit does is it is constructed in such a way that there is no break in the carbide. So the entire bottom surface, the entire 1.5-inch diameter, is cutting surface. And so you're removing 1.5 inches of material at a time. Also, the sides of this surfacing bit are perpendicular, so you're able to get square edges wherever you butt up against it. So these surfacing bits are amazing, and I can't imagine trying to level my spoil board without one. The one that I'm recommending is going to cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 versus the type that I mentioned earlier with the indexable carbides, which would be $200 and $300. So, you choose how you want to spend your money. I know how I spent mine. Now, if you're going to be doing V-carving, like you might be if you were the lucky person to win that V-carve desktop software we were talking about earlier, you're going to need a V-groove bit. And a V-groove bit is simply a bit that leaves a kerf that is V-shaped. It is an angled bit that, for instance, you could have a 60-degree bit or a 90-degree bit or a 110-degree bit, and they would each cut different profiles into your surface based on the number of degrees that you're using. Now, I have a favorite bit, and I'm never shy about telling people about this. In fact, I wrote an entire blog post over at makermasters.com about this single bit, because it is probably the most used bit in my workshop, and it's made by CMT. It's a laser point bit. And at any rate, it is a 60-degree bit with a 1/4 inch shaft, and there's a link there to that bit. I happen to like it because it has a very sharp point at the end. Some V bits have flat surfaces on the end and don't give you a crisp line, and this one does. So I highly recommend that bit. Again, it's not terribly expensive, and that's repeating through this. I think if you bought every bit that I mentioned today, you wouldn't crack the $200 mark. So most of these are very inexpensive. But you need a V-groove bit to do V-carving. Plain and simple. The next type of bit is a ball nose bit. And a ball nose bit has a round tip, generally completely circular. I don't know of a bit that doesn't have that other than maybe a bull nose bit, but we won't be discussing that today. Ball nose bits come in a variety of diameters, and the tip diameter determines how fine a level of detail you can put into your 3D carving. And that's what these ball nose bits are used for. You're able to machine very detailed carvings with ball nose bits. It's typical for a person to use a 16th inch ball nose to do some detail work. I've seen people use as low as a 64th of an inch ball nose bit, but those are very expensive and they break very easily. You can do a lot of good work with a 1/8 inch ball nose or a 1/4 inch ball nose. If you have a lot of material to remove on a 3D project, you might want to start with a bigger bit like a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch ball nose and do your roughing pass with that. It will get the majority of the stock removed without having to worry about breaking the bit, and you can go a little bit faster with a large bit. And then you can do a process called rest machining, which is kind of an advanced feature in some of the software like Vectric Aspire or VCarve Pro, which allows you to remove just the areas that didn't get cut by the larger bit. I may do a video in the future about rest machining because it's really too complicated to go into over the air. It's difficult to explain. If you're going to be using ball nose bits, just like anything, if you've got a large area to be removed, use a large bit. If you've got small detailed areas, use a smaller bit. And the last bit we're going to talk about today is the shape bits. And there really are many different types of shape bits. And a shape bit is just what it sounds like. It's a bit that's machined in a particular shape to give a specific profile when it's done. A good example of a shape bit would be a keyhole bit, which is a big round flat cutter on the end of it that goes to a narrow neck. And so you would plunge that in, and it would leave a circle, and then you'd mill it forward, and it would cut a slot with a circle hidden beneath the surface that you couldn't see, and that's would allow you to hang a picture on a wall. So a shape bit, one example of that is a keyhole bit. And there are other shape bits, which, are kind of a subgroup of things that you use for profiling shapes, like for molding in a house. You might have an OG or a round over bit or a cove bit, those sorts of things. Those are all shape bits. And for the most part, many people using the CNC don't use many of the shaped bits. They might use the keyhole bit to make hanger slots. They might use a round over bit. They might use a plunge round over bit. The difference between a plunge round over bit and a regular round over bit. The difference between a round over bit and a plunge round over bit is a round over bit would have a bearing on the end for using with a handheld router. And a plunge bit would come to a sharp point, so it's able to plunge into the wood and then make its path. I don't think I'm going to include a plunge round over bit in the list that I have because it's a specialty tool, but it is something to consider when you get a little more advanced. As far as the starting bits that you need, you really only need a few. So here's what I've done. I went to Amazon and I did some looking around, and I gathered together one of each type of bit that I thought you would use or need in your first few months of CNC operation. And I put them all together for you. And like I said, you can go to cncroutertips.com/bits and look at this. And rather than have you running all over the internet trying to find, obscure websites that deal with specialty bits and everything, I just went and I gathered the group of bits that get the job done, that don't cost a whole lot, that are still good enough quality bits to use initially to give you good results, but aren't breaking the bank. So, there are not going to be any of the high-end cutters here in this group that you see. I will have a high-end cutter selection available for you there, but in this first starter bit set, I think is important to keep your cost low, so that you're not spending a whole lot getting started while you're still breaking bits, because until you know how to use these bits, you're eventually going to break some. And it's much better to break a cheap bit than it is to break an expensive bit. So what I did was I put all these together on that page. You can go there and you can click the button and it'll add them to your Amazon shopping cart, and you can delete whatever you don't need or whatever you want. But it will put them all there in one place, and you can look at them and you can decide, is this the bit that I want? And if not, get rid of it. If it is the bit you want, then you're halfway there. Took some of the pain out of it, because this can be a pain. So if that's something you want to examine, it's there at cncroutertips.com/bits. Now, in all fairness, I am an Amazon associate. And what that means is, if you use that link, then I will get a very small commission from Amazon, from them, for showing their products. Now, we're talking probably a penny or two on a dollar purchase. So it doesn't end up costing you anymore, but it is just one of those ways that I can support the expenses that are used when I create this podcast and keep up the website. So if that's something that you would like to do, there it is. In all fairness, I thought that you should know. But it is one way that allows me to pay for this site. And if that Amazon Associate Program is something that you'd like to hear more about in the future, I can tell you whatever you need to know. Just let me know if that is something that folks would like to hear about, because you can put this kind of thing on your own website, and it might help you out. So there you go. Thanks again, Jay, for that wonderful question. And because your question was featured on this episode, you'll be receiving a free gift as a way of thanking you for asking your question. If you'd like to have your question featured on an episode, we'll tell you about how to do that right after this message from our sponsor.
Today's episode is sponsored by The Maker's Guide, creator of the Triple Edge Finder. Get the edge you need, save time and frustration on your CNC project, and make setup a snap. Save time and material. Set up your workpiece on your CNC router table faster than ever. Accurately set your Z-axis height first time, every time. Automatically locate the corner or edge of a workpiece. Reset your starting point in the middle of a program. Quality crafted right here in the USA on US-made CNC machines. Get the edge you need today. Go to www.themakersguide.com/edge. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. I'm glad that you did, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows about the contest, the giveaway that we're having. We're giving away a copy of Vectric VCarve desktop software. Absolutely free. Just enter at cncroutertips.com/contest. I know come the deadline, somebody's going to be crying because they didn't listen into the episode when it came out and they missed it. Those who do listen can win, so that's really cool. So go take the time and sign up to win at cncroutertips.com/contest. I often mention many different types of software during the episodes and hardware and cutters, and it can get a little confusing. So what I did was I put together a page on my website, cncroutertips.com/resources. And on that page, I list all sorts of resources there, from books to tools to software, all the things that I use that make my CNC experience better and easier. And I hope you'll check it out. So again, it's cncroutertips.com/resources. Now, if you'd like to have your question featured on the air, here's how. Need help? Ask me about your CNC router question on my podcast, the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'll be glad to help or try and get you the help you need. I want this podcast to be a fun and personal experience for everyone and helpful. So let's keep it real and ask sensible questions. Please use common sense and show courtesy to everyone. That way everybody wins. Here are some guidelines to ensure that your question is qualified to be featured on the show. Please keep your questions under 1 minute in length. If it goes a little over that, that's fine, but don't ramble. If you have a website and URL, you're allowed to share it, but only once during the recording. Spammy or disrespectful or deeply private questions will not be considered for the podcast. If you need to ask more than one question, just make each question a separate voicemail. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in and listening to the CNC Router Tips podcast. If you'd like to join our free mailing list, you can go to cncroutertips.com, and there's a link right there on the top of the page which tells you how to do that. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Just remember, you got to be in it to win it.